in those moments of life, there's a fork in the road, I think. I don't ever remember the first time I remember hearing music, but the first time I felt it as like, oh man, this is something, was during that 8-year-old time of my life where I think it saved me.
Hey, what's up, y'all? It's me here, Michael Franti, and welcome to this week's edition of the Stay Human podcast, which I'm very, very excited about because I get to talk to an artist whose music I only just became familiar with a couple of days ago. And before we get into that, though, I want you to learn about the opening act, I should say, which is an incredible brand, Pact. They are clothing that is made from the seeds all the way through the supply chain, all the way to when you get it, the most organic and the most labor safe and friendly way possible. And on top of that, you don't get like some hippie, crusty, organic clothing when you get it. It's actually super high fashion. It wears really well and it looks really beautiful. So go check out wearpact.com, wearpact.com, and find out more about the amazing things that they're doing in fashion and apparel. In just about 5 years, our guest today has built an impressive foundation for his musical career, including 4, count them, 1, 2, 3, 4, number 1 singles, 5 gold certified singles, 1 billion global streams, over 100 million YouTube views, and he has performed at the Grand Ole Opry 65 times. You probably recognize him by his hit songs like Think a Little Less, One That Got Away, and Whiskey and Rain. And his latest single, Holy Water, has recently been climbing the charts at country radio. Let's welcome to the podcast, Michael Ray. How's it going, Michael?
Yeah, man. Thank you, buddy.
Yeah. What does it feel like to hear just, some of the stats I rattled off? Like if you were a professional athlete, you'd have some Hall of Fame kind of statistics going there musically. What does it feel like, 5 years into it, seeing those kinds of numbers?
Man, I mean, it's crazy. Kind of just, never seems real because you know how it is, man. We just stay on the focus of the road and making music and writing, and you kind of don't pay attention to a lot of that stuff. And it's funny that you use Hall of Fame analogies. I lean into my family a lot of times when we're on the road, or, it is. It's even when it's good, it's, the highs are high, but the lows can be very low, and they could all be a multiple in 1 week, And so sometimes I'll be talking to my dad, and he'll use that. He's like, dude, he goes, if you're a baseball player, those are pretty good odds, don't you think? And I'm like, well, I guess you're right, Dad. Yeah, that's good. So it's crazy, man. It's surreal. I just feel very blessed, man. Very, very lucky.
Nice. It's been weird for me adjusting to, how we count Spotify, we count Instagram likes, we count the YouTube views. Because for me, it's always been about, connecting with souls and people feeling the music and developing a relationship with the audience. And I'm just curious, as you've been doing it and been out there week after week on tour, what is the biggest reward for you, in terms of connection with the audience? How does that show up, I should say?
Man, I think where the payoff is knowing that people, especially in the world, we live in now, and everything's so crazy, so expensive, coming to a concert, it's never been an easy thing, if you have wife and kids or husband and, you're just trying to get a job, trying to get the weekend set up, get the hotel. Well, now it's even harder because everything's even more just in a little bit more expensive than it has been, So for me, I always think about like, man, I'm in a place I've never been in, and I don't care if it's 500 or 5,000 or whatever, but this many people made plans, spent hard-earned money that they could have spent on anything else. Maybe it's the date night, maybe it's the night out for the husband and wife to finally get away from the kids, whatever it is. They could literally be doing anything else with that time and with their time and their money. And they're choosing to spend their time together and make a memory with my music. And like that stuff blows my mind to me, man, especially when you're in just some middle of nowhere fair, that maybe
Yeah.
you've taken you 4 days to get out there and you're just like, oh my God, dude. And then finally, but you get out there and they're like, man, the town's just, they're so excited for you to be there. And then you get to meet some local fans and meet people and you're like, holy cow, man, this is why we do it. Not to get brought up, not to get caught up in all the other numbers and all that stuff. Like you said, man, we do it to connect. We do it to the reason why you and I got into it was because we heard something, that made us go, oh my gosh, man, what is that?
Yeah.
It was said in a different way or taught to us. So for me, that payoff, and I always tell my guys, I'm like, man, all the writing, record, whatever else you got to do that might be a grind sometimes or whatever, it all pays up whenever that guy's got his girl on his shoulders or the kids up front singing every word. It's like those are the moments, man. That's where you go, okay, we're doing something bigger than us.
Yeah. Do you remember for you the first time that music ever really hit you? Not necessarily like going to a concert or something like that, but just in your life, singing at home or church or just when. But what was the first time where you felt like, man, this moved me, this touched me. I'm hearing something in this that really helps me to understand who I am.
It was funny because I grew up in a family that had a band. So my family's band was together before I
Wow.
was born. So it was my dad, my uncle, two of my cousins, and my grandpa, maybe three of my cousins. Anyway, they had a country band that just played around Florida, and did their thing. But they were pretty well known go-to band for Florida, around there. And so I was kind of like born into it. So I don't ever. And my grandfather, when he got out of the army, it was like his mission to have instruments in every family members of my house.
Mm,
Like still to this day, I mean, there's cousins of mine that are playing music, that are playing guitar, that that have tried to play guitar, whatever. Maybe some of them
yeah.
can, some can't, but it's all because my grandpa just had this love. And for me, I think the moment I remember going, I connect with this is when my parents got divorced when I was 8, and my grandfather, I really stepped in that role during that time. And I was always around music, but it was the first time where they were putting a guitar in my hands, and hey man, let me show you these chords. And then it was just in those moments of life, there's a fork in the road, I think, and you could go one way, but either way, you're affected by that trauma. No matter which way you go, you're affected
Yeah.
some way. But there's a fork in the road where you can either go just like it, or make it affect you, or act out, or do whatever, or somebody steps in and maybe goes, "Hey, man, look at this shiny toy over here,"
Yeah.
go that route. And so that was the first moment where I was like, I started learning, and that's when I felt music for the first time. When I started be able to put chords together, and I was, got to play with my grandpa's band a little bit, and then I started doing stuff in church and in chapel and stuff like that. So I think I don't ever remember the first time I remember hearing music, because I think it was always around. It was probably when
Yeah.
I was in my mother's womb, I'm sure, when I heard it. But the first time I felt it as like, oh
Mm,
man, this is something, was during that 8-year-old time of my life where I think it saved me.
yeah. Yeah. I had a similar experience, growing up. When my parents were going through rough times, I used to put my headphones on and just to block out what was happening in the next room. And music would take me somewhere. I'd hear these voices of people who were telling me stories about things that seemed like they wrote it for me, exactly for me. Um, when you were a kid growing up, tell me about your family. Did you have siblings also in the house, or?
Yeah, so so my dad, I had two sisters from my dad's first marriage when he was younger,
Mhm.
and then I have a little sister from my dad, my mom's marriage, and then they split, and I grew up with a stepfather and two stepsisters. So I was the only one that lived in my dad's house, but
Mhm.
they kept me and my little sister on the same weekend
Mhm.
split. So I grew up with siblings, but not a lot in the house, as far as because I was living over there. But a big family, man, huge. I think my grandmother's one of 8 girls or 7 girls, and my grandpa was one of 6 boys and 1 girl. I might be messing that up, but there was a lot of them, man. And everybody, they all still live in the same little area, so we don't meet up. It was very just a country way of living. We meet up. My bus stop was my great grandmother's little yellow house. That was my dad's bus stop when he was a kid, and We'd all meet up in the morning times before school, and my great grandmother would make breakfast for everybody, and it was just one of those type of families, So it was my all my family were first responders. A lot of my family, my dad was a paramedic firefighter, my uncle was, so definitely a big family that was big in the community. Did a lot of stuff like that. A lot of servants. I feel like in that world.
Yeah, yeah. When you're talking about when your parents split up and there was like we make choices in life. We can either go this way or this way, but some of us have this someone who steps in and shows us something different. Talk me through that a little bit for you. Like were you seeing like, man, I could go this way or I could go this way, or was there a point in your life when you were acting out, or what was your early teens like?
Man, I think, and I'm saying, I went and did a week of hardcore therapy for the first time in my life, beginning of this year. So I'm saying all this, saying that I did a lot of work on this. I didn't realize how much of it that I held on to, but growing up, that's why I do a lot of work with first responders, a lot of work with military, because growing up in a family that PTSD was a very real thing. And if the people around you don't know how to fix that, or maybe don't even know what they're going through, it comes out in other ways, And so there was a lot of times where there was a lot of anger, a lot of fighting, a lot of holes punched in walls, a lot of verbal abuse in ways, of just some people just didn't know how to act out. They were just it just busted out. And the same way, never doubted their love for me. You know what I mean? Or they're a call away at any moment. So it was kind of like I was one of 4 kids, but also of a double divorced home, who was the peacemaker, who didn't want to ruffle any feathers, And so I never really grew up knowing how to like argue. It was always like arguments lead to physical, or a hole in a wall or whatever. So those times, man, it was, like I said, as much as that happened, there was never a doubt for love, so I never doubted a love, or the fact that we're all still very close. But it was fun, man. I was able to, we lived in a town, or like I said, in that area where all my cousins were and everything. So there was a lot of other family members around that really stepped in during that time. But for me, I remember when my parents got divorced, man, it was brutal, man, for like 2 years. It was back and forth, Definitely there was anger between them two that was put on me and my little sister, as far as like, well, I'll just take them here. I'll do that, So it was, and I don't think they realized, and I didn't realize till later on in life, that how much of that affected how I am now. If stress gets happening, whatever. So I kind of revert to that, kid again, okay, let's just fix this and do what we can. So I remember very strongly my grandfather and my grandmother stepping in hardcore during that time. And really, I think for me, when I started playing, and I realized that I was very lucky to have my grandfather for as long as I did, and grandparents for as long as I did, especially during that time. And for me, it was like, that was my dad's dad, so I was like, oh my God, he's the coolest dude in the world. So, and he played guitar, he had like cool army stories, and like he was, everybody loved him. So I was like, this is the coolest dude. He started the fire department and it with my dad and them, so it was just like, my dad was always a cool guy, and then your grandpa was always the guy that made the cool guy, so I think me and him just got so tight that I was like, I felt like I watched their marriage and I watched how they were, and even though no one's perfect, I was just like, okay, I want to be around that. Like this is hell. Like there's a lot of stuff going on here that freaks me out, and I don't want to be a part of that. But this seems more chill, safe. So I think that's why I went with it. Kind of lean more into that, mainly to impress him, my love for music, but also just as a kid going, this feels a little more chill than over here for the moment.
Yeah. It's great that we're in a time when, men can openly say, like, I just spent a week doing therapy. I'm looking at all these things. I'm doing a deep personal inventory and asking myself how I want to show up in the world. And music for me has been one of the ways that I process all of that. You know, when I'm going
Mm.
through something, whether it's great joy or great sorrow or trauma or whatever, the deepest emotions of my life are what I write from. At what point for you did actually writing songs, your own music, telling your own story, become part of your musical journey?
When I was in middle school, I started listening to Gary Allen, and I remember like looking at the people that wrote like right where I need to be, and I'm like, there was this C. Beathard guy on there. Underneath, there's these names under the songs. You'd buy the
Yeah.
CDs and open them up, and I'm like, who are these dudes? And I'm like, that must be the band or whatever. Then I started looking at like I'm a big traditional country music fan. Love that 70s country, 80s country, obviously 90s
I hear
country.
that in your music.
Thanks, man. So I started like listening a bunch, and I was like, "Who's this Jay Steele guy? He wrote everything that I love, And wait a minute, who's this name?" So I asked my dad, "I'm like, who are these? What are these names?" And he's like, "Those are songwriters." And that's when I realized that there were people that wrote songs, and that just not every artist is a songwriter, and not every artist writes their songs. Some do, some. Kenny Chesney, for instance, he's a great songwriter, but also cuts outside songs. So I was like, oh. So I remember one weekend I went to my mom's because my dad didn't have a computer. We didn't have a computer at my dad's house, so we had one at my mom's. And I spent like so much. I probably spent hours on like I was like countrylyrics.com or whatever.com, and I looking up, and I'm like, just went on this search of like Casey Beathard and Jeffrey Steele and the Highwaymen and all these guys, and I'm like, holy crap, dude! Like these guys. And I started realizing all the songs that I loved of theirs were a little more heavier than a kid probably at 11 years old, 12 years old was listening to, but I related to them because, the last 4 years of my life have been this divorce hell. And
Mm-hmm.
I was like, man, I was like the 11-year-old kid that probably if I could have been drinking coffee, smoking a cigarette, stressed out from the last 5 years. So I was like, I get that guy. And, and so I was like, man, I wonder if I could write those stories. And so I started writing little songs in my room. I played for my dad, go out playing for him, and my dad always kind of wanted to write songs, so sometimes him and I would write together, and then that became something him and I would do. It brought me and a couple cousins of mine together. We'd spend our weekends, man, writing songs, or our weeknights writing songs almost every night around a bonfire at my cousin Lee's house, and I just came obsessed with creating music, and just seeing what people thought,
Yeah.
seeing what our buddies thought. And we'd write a song and immediately just, hey man, you gotta listen to this, play it for all our friends. And so it's probably that time period, that middle school into high school time, where I was like really wanting to write songs and tell my own story and dive into what other, start trying to get inspired by other writers as well that I related to, and I liked how they did things differently.
Hey, I love recording these Stay Human podcast episodes because I get to talk to some pretty incredible people who are out there shaking up their industries and changing the world in their own ways. So it's fitting that our sponsor is doing just the same, but in the fashion industry. As it turns out, the fashion industry is a, pretty, well, I'll say it, dirty business. Conventional clothing companies often use plastics, pesticides, unfair wages, harsh working conditions, and the list goes on and on and on and on. But PACT is on a mission to change all of that. PACT is a clothing company that puts the planet and the people on it first. They source premium, organic cotton, partner with safe, fair trade factories, minimize plastic use, offer green shipping options, and even use 81% less water to make their clothing. And the result, I'll tell you, is comfortable, clean, everyday items that you can wear in good conscience and that look great. In short, they're Earth's favorite clothing company, and my favorite too. You can join the movement by shopping sustainably made styles for women, men, kids, and babies, and even 100% organic bed and bath collections at wearpact.com. And as a Stay Human special, you'll get 20% off your first order. So just use my code, all capital letters, Stay Human, at the checkout when you visit wearpact.com. That's wearpact.com. You know, when I hear your music and now hear your story, I wonder, well, first of all, are both your father and grandfather alive today?
My dad is, yeah. My grandfather passed away 6 years ago. Yeah.
Has there ever been a time now that you've been out on the road when your pop joined you on stage?
Yeah, man. Yeah, I had him out with me one time in Chicago. He's like he won't. He's like, man, I just like watching you sing now. And I was like, well, I'm bringing you up, dude. Shut up, man. I wouldn't be up here singing if it wasn't for you. So you at least got to get up here. So it's always cool, and he loves him, man, because he was a lead singer of the family band. So in a lot of ways, I think he's living vicariously through me and the band and everybody. And we put him on master tour, so he's calling me every day. Hey, man, saw you here. You know, he's hopping on the bus when he can. So yeah, I get him on stage once in a while when I can.
Nice, that's awesome. Tell me about how you actually broke into the business. You know, what was your trajectory from going and playing, and what was your first band apart from your family band?
So I'd go to this little place called the Eustis Sunshine Opry, and it was a little replica of the Opry House, and it was an old dollar theater. They turned into this Opry House, and during the winter time, whenever everybody from up north comes down to Florida, they would have shows there, bigger shows on Saturdays, like Ray Price, Porter Wagner, Bobby Bear. Friday nights would be open mic night with a band, with a professional band, and you could sign up, do 2 songs a piece. Well, I remember talking to my dad and even my grandpa, and they're like, man, if you got to step up, like, we're not moving to Nashville with you, dude. So, like, you got to learn how to be with another group, man. Like, we love you, but we're not going with you. And so it was my way of cutting my teeth with another band. And so I would do that on Fridays. And then once in a while on Saturdays, they'd throw me like a 30-minute, 45-minute set. And then that led to me playing acoustic in bars in Central Florida. So I met a guy named Jeff Hurst, who's a songwriter and a firefighter down home in Florida. Well, he was coming back and forth to Nashville, and me and him met each other and just instantly hit it off, started writing songs. And that was like the first time where I was like co-writing with somebody that had written with people in Nashville that, had already been in talks with somebody and with a pub deal, had been going to record music. So I started writing with him, and very long story short, we wrote some songs, took them into a guy named David Preston at BMI, who was the only guy that would meet with us at the time, because nobody knew the heck we were, we didn't have anything going on. So we went in there, and I remember he listened to one song and he listened to a second song and turned it halfway off. And I was like, oh, this is where he tells me, go home, man, stay down there. And he's like, man, he goes, you got something, man. He goes, what are you doing down home? And at the time, dude, I was playing 4 or 5 nights a week, 4 hours a night acoustics, trying to save every bit of money I could to move to Nashville. I was splicing telephone cable and installing telephone cable when I could, just saving everything. Because I was like, you move to Nashville, right? When you're 18, you get up and go. And he's like, man, things are changing. He goes, go back home, put a band together, and become the biggest damn thing you could be in Florida. When people think of country music in Florida, make them think of you. And then make Nashville see you. He goes, the days of showcases and getting signed from a showcase deal, which for anybody watching and listening, is when you put a show on 4 record labels in Nashville. He's like, I think they're slowly drifting away. And it was weird because it was like 10 years later, no one's doing showcases anymore. And I'm like, holy crap, man. Like, it was like he had this little crystal ball, but luckily no one would meet with us, so we didn't know anything else. So I put a band together down home, and I would go into these bigger clubs and these places, and my buddy Jeff Hurst was helping me book. I'd go in with these press packets, the photo and the 10 fun facts and the CD and all that stuff. And I go in and I'd be like, hey man, I got this band here. And I already had some built up name from the acoustic stuff I was doing, but that's a way different thing when you're opening for national acts and, trying to put something together. So I put this band together, man, and we started opening for a lot of the national acts that were coming down. And then I had my first kind of big gig, I remember, with that band, and it was at a place called Boots and Buckles. And I walked in, and the guy, John, who's still a buddy of mine to this day, he was the owner. There was nobody in there because we went during the day, and I gave him my press pack, and he was like, all right, cool, thanks. And then a guy that I had not seen in years, we all called him Cookie. I hadn't seen him in forever at that time. He happened to be bartending. So he comes running out and he's like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "What are you doing here, dude?" And so anyway, he's like, I'll make sure you get it. So John calls me and we get booked this show, man. And I rehearsed like it was my opening night of the Grammys, like we were about to just crush. And I got off stage and this lady came up to me and was like, "Do you have a CD?" And I just recorded a CD in Austin, Texas, actually. And I said, "Yeah." I gave it to her. And the next day, my buddy called me freaking out that I was on the radio. And I didn't know this, but wow. She was the afternoon lady for 97.5. And I started spinning my stuff at around 5 o'clock to give it a shot. And I had no idea. And it started working and it started selling tickets. And that was the moment for me that I started really feeling like, oh, wait a minute, more people than just the people in my hometown. Because there's a little bit of that where you're like, my parents might have to tell me they like it. I don't know. My buddies might tell me they like it. But if people are just listening to it while they're driving down the road and all of a sudden our tickets are going up, like I didn't know how to make it. There was not that much social media. There was like the Facebook page, I didn't even have one of those. Yeah. So that was a moment for me where I was like, oh, okay, this could be more than just what we're doing here. And then I just took that up to continue to grow that and kept in touch with David Preston until I could finally move to Nashville and live in a 2-bedroom, 2-bath with 5 dudes.
When I listen to your music, I hear this bridge to, like you said, the music of the 70s and 80s. There's a kind of soul to your voice, first of all, but also to the musicality, the way that you build the songs, the organicness of the instruments. And it's something that very few artists, I think, have really been able to do, is to create a sound that's really authentic, but it still is modern. It still cuts through, I just want, in the pop sort of sense of totally. Where country music is today. Is that an intentional? Is just what you guys do? It just comes about naturally, but what is it that keeps that, that authenticity, that soul when you go into to actually record?
I think it's natural. I think that part of it is natural and a lot of it is very, very intentional. Because I didn't grow up. I grew up in the 90s, in the early 2000s. So I grew up listening to a lot of that, different pop, maybe hip hop or punk rock or whatever, but it wasn't my go-to. That wasn't, my friends were listening to Limp Bizkit. I was listening to Earl Thomas Conley. I knew who they were. So it was like, I respected that. And I definitely had that influence growing up in that generation, but it wasn't my go-to sound. It wasn't what I related to. It wasn't what I was listening to. And so for me, I've always tried, and even more with this higher education record and into this next record, when I go back and listen to the music in those records of the 80s and how much they breathe and how much air is in there and everything you can just hear, the guitars are so right there, man, in your face, and the drum is it's breathable, man. You don't feel like you're just getting this wall of sound the whole time. And so for me, I was like, man, if we could find a way to bridge that gap as much as we can to, I want to play ball and I love country music and I know where it's at, but I want to bring this with me, and see how we can blend the two. Cause I can't do, I don't know. I won't say I can't. That's just not me if I went full, and I did that in the beginning, saying yes too much and not really having that confidence in the first record. And now looking back, I'm like, okay, but in a learning way, I go, all right, well, I'll never do that again. So here's what I'm going to bring with me that makes it me, but also, like you said, commercial or whatever that might be, which hopefully makes it stand out on the radio too. When I feel like, a lot of times, a lot of people songs can start really sounding the same if it's not careful, just because it's so compacted down, man. It's so much is going on. So I think a lot of it is just what I grew up naturally listening to. So I'm naturally gonna go to a sad country lyric or a sad country. That's why sometimes I'll have ideas when I go into a writer room and I'm like, all right, guys, I have this idea, but I want to hear what y'all think first before I pitch this sad ass idea that I had before. Because I'll take it sad real quick. But But yeah, and I think the other half of it is intentional to make sure that we keep that authenticity going.
Yeah. Do you have a family yourself now? Are you
I
married? Do you have,
I, I don't know. No, it's just me.
yeah. Do you have a girlfriend, or is there a part of your life, like, do you see that being part of your life in the
Yeah, for
future,
sure.
in the near
Yeah,
future?
absolutely. Yeah, I want a family one day, man. I think that's why, I'm, my early 30s. So it's, those days you start thinking about a little more, you start going back and I start seeing some of my family getting older and my niece and my nephews getting older. My two older sisters have kids. And so it's definitely something I want to do. I think that's the big purpose of why we were put on this earth. We're here to make music, but we're also here to, leave a legacy and hopefully leave something behind and leave it better than we are. And that was a big purpose of why I did that therapy early on, is to knock off a lot of old stuff so you can break that chain of
Yeah.
habit that we can create and not even know it, and it's not
Yeah.
an intentional thing. Majority of the time it's very, you just don't even know it's happening. So definitely something I want, definitely something I'm trying to work hard now so I can hopefully set up for later and be able to be very present during that time whenever that time comes. So
Yeah. You know, one of the things that came up for me during the pandemic was just the idea of friendship, and what is friendship, because as someone who spent so much of my life touring, I have had not very many opportunities to create like deep bonded friendships with people that are back home, because I'm gone all the time, and then
right.
when I go home, I'm like with my two sons. Now I have three sons, but for a lot of it was just road, going home, take care of my kids, road, going home, and I didn't really like create these friendships. And then when the pandemic hit and suddenly I was home all the time, I was like, wow, like, who are my friends, like my deepest friends? And I had to really think about it. And then I thought, well, I spend 6 months of the year on the road with these guys, and then when we get home, we see each other so much, we're in a tour bus so much, so we get home, we just scatter, and and
Yeah.
but then I thought, these are these are the people I spend so much of my time with. These really are my friends. And how can I like lean into this relationship in a deeper way, because before it'd be like I call, Carl, my bass player, we've been friends and bandmates since 1994. I call him, I go, hey bro, how you doing? He go, yeah, I'm cool. How you doing, bro? And I go, yeah, I'm cool. And then click, that was the end of the conversation. But then now he'd call me and he'd say, hey bro, how you doing? I go, I'm doing, I'm doing all right. And he'd go, no, tell me really, like, how you doing? Like, what's going on in your life? Like, how's it at home? How's the pandemic? How's your family? How are your finances? How are you? How's your mental health? What's going on in your heart? What are you thinking about? And we started just having conversations in a way that we never did before. So I'm just wondering, at this point in your life, this stage, like, how important are friendships to you, and have they evolved? Have they changed in the years, or perhaps even during the pandemic?
Yeah, man, I can really echo what you said too about that, the touring life and even just coming home and trying to balance everything. And I always have mad respect for everybody touring with family and kids and stuff. I'm like, man, it's hard on your own. I don't know how people do it, and balance. But man, you know what I realized is how lucky I was to have friends that didn't give up
Mm,
on, in a time when I was, feeling, I never felt, I feel like maybe, I mean, now looking back, there was depression for sure. I just didn't notice what it was. I've always had this underlying anxiety feeling since I was a kid that only grew, as
mm,
you got older. That instead of me reaching out, I always thought, well, Michael's got his problem, man. He's got his family, dude. He don't want to hear, I don't want to bother him with my
yeah,
stuff, dude. I'm cool. I'll smoke. I'll do this. I'll do something else. I'll do whatever else, and then I'll put a mask on when I see Michael, and it'll all be good. Everybody will be fine. Well, you can only do that for so long. It's like shaking up a Coke bottle and bouncing it off the sidewalk. It just goes everywhere. And so for me, I like cocoon, man, or cocoon, however you want to call it. For me, it got worse, man, over the last couple of years. It just like not want to leave the house, not, you know, and I'm a huge extrovert guy, and I'm not this guy at all. And I started realizing I was being different, which made me bring myself even lower. So I'm like, oh, if I'm recognizing and they're recognizing, I want. So then you start just being, I'll call them back later, or I'll text them back later, or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And I did that a lot, man, and struggled with it, and really try to break that habit of that. You know, when I have a problem, I know I got friends now that I can come to because they didn't give up. You know, a couple of them called me and told me that, hey, man, I'm going to come grab you. And you don't have a choice, you know, so I don't, yeah. And so those little things I look back and I was like, man, they're definitely, I'm very lucky to have those friends that didn't just say, nah, screw him or whatever, you know. I feel like they understood me and then allowed me to realize it myself. So the label friendship now means way more to me, I think, now than it probably ever has in my life, because I understand, like you said, you know, we got our boys, dude, we got our band, but we're like, hey, you cool? Yeah, cool. All right, let's go get the catering, you know. Then you don't say anything, or you try to be cool because you're on the road. And now I realize that it means a lot, man, and we need to be checked in on as well as check in on each other. Even when things are going good, doesn't mean they're always going the way they seem to be for a lot of people.
Yeah. You just never know what anybody's carrying at any point, you know?
Right.
I got one last question for you, Michael, which is the question I ask everybody who comes on the show, which is, what does it mean to you to stay human? Like, what does it mean to be human, first of all? And then how do you stay that way?
I think being human is knowing you're not perfect, and knowing that you wake up every day and just try to make today better than yesterday, and the next day better than today. And staying human means that you inspire others to know that and where they're at and in their world, you know. And if you can try to remind yourself that, especially in the world that we live in now, where I feel like we're, you know, so much social media, so much comparing, so much, you got to do this. I don't have the numbers he does. Why don't I, you know, all this stuff. It's like, dude, you're judging the real on a highlight reel. Like, you can't do it. You're judging real stuff on something that I'm showing you my best work, right? No one's showing you, I'm not showing you the show that 50 people came to, I'm showing you the people 5,000 came to, you know? And so, I just think staying human, it keeps you humble. It keeps when those moments come in your life, they mean so much more, you know, and you can kind of stand on that mountain a little more and realize, man, I've worked hard. I've dealt with myself with grace and empathy as well as others too, you know, and being human keeps everybody else human, man. And we're all just trying to figure it out there. You know, I wish there was a handbook, but there ain't none. I've looked.
No. Hey man, thanks a lot. It's been great talking to you, and I'm excited to come see you play some point and give you a handshake and a hug in person. And where can folks find you? Are you guys out all the time, and are you active on social media?
Oh yeah, I'm active on social media. We've been out on the Lee Bryce tour, so that's been a good time, and we're getting in the studio soon and going to be getting in that and writing some songs. So yeah, and you can find anything on michaelraymusic.com and Michael Ray Music Instagram, all that stuff, and we're all active on there. Y'all come out and see us, man. I can't wait to see you, man.
Awesome. Well, on behalf of Pact, which are an incredible apparel brand, you should check them out at wearpact.com, WEAR Pact, PACT.com. And myself, Michael, thanks for being on the Stay Human Show.
Thank you, buddy. Appreciate it.